As normal, we begin by setting a sincere motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain peerless state of enlightenment, knowing that in order to do that, I must train and perfect all the trainings of the Bodhisattva path. To do that, I must have a very good understanding of what they are, and I must be able to gain that understanding based on a non-mistaken source of information. And so it is with this in mind that I am here to hear teaching from the mind training series of teachings this morning. And so then, as normal as well, we begin by establishing the merit field in our presence. Here, it consists of, in reality, our own kind root guru in aspect of the thousand-armed, thousand-eyes Chen Rezi. And that in all around us, we visualize all kind mother sentient beings. And that we see how the figure of Chen Rezig is marked at the crown with an Om, at the throat with an A, and at the heart with the syllable Hung. And from that Hung syllable at the heart, countless rays of light emanate, going out into the pure realms and inviting back the wisdom beings and the pledged beings. And that the wisdom beings dissolve into the figure of Chen Rezig, and the pledged beings confer empowerment. And then through an overflow of the nectar of empowerment, the figure of Amitabha is established on the crown of the figure of Chen Rezig. And that we now see this merit field as the embodiment of all of the Buddhas of the three times of existence. And so that as the prayer goes, you are the Yidam, you are the Dharma protectors, you are the Dakinis, etc. How we envisage or we visualize or see the main figure of a merit field as being the complete embodiment of all the Buddhas, the embodiment of all refuge as well.
가서 다 any semjala mi be ta ninche tunga na chula samda ninche ani da tena set lama cheres la mi be ta da yunde tuwe tona ani 가서 다 같이 다외도 뭐도 이제 때 발라서 다 같이 어떻게 우리들이 지게 되는 어떻게 고마시
And that we visualize all kind of sentient beings then also marked at the three places with the syllables hung, and that we see all of the sentient beings, view them with a mind of compassion, being really aware of the kinds of suffering that they are undergoing, and that indeed also, as well as ourselves, our sentient beings are aware of the figure of Chinrezig at the merit field, and in kind of vision, in view of their understanding of the enlightened qualities of the figure in the merit field, they are looking towards that figure as we are, with the mind of faith, that faith of pure faith, of faith of conviction and manifestation.
뭐래 딱 그 가산 쇼한의 신체잖아 딱 이제 근데 지금 둘라 세트에 제레스도 군다소로 인데 고마 마셔 봤잖아 제레스 무슨 말 유효선서 무슨 말지 유효선서 어디에 고마셔 아니지 아니 배 주변에서 봐 나서 봤잖아 딱 마다베 신도 딱 그죠 할로
Hello, can I?
Conta. Kalau kawas lihat itu.
Yeah, right, yeah, they get that. Talk about it.
Ani de casa de tada de casa de 다 주변으로 만나서 봤더니 마다베시 갈라 간주게 아니 semjeg de 야 주바 semjeg 규면 미마체 미마 들어왔잖아요 야 투투 야 파트 다 가져다 가서 24 hours 7 days 딱 간제 된대게 딱 간제 semjeg 아니 배 이제 매봤다 계지가 미요아 나 되겠지我得공부해我得냐바 자식에 전에 아니 이것은 되게 배면 루도 나셔 스타팅 산제 켜봐 산제 윤대와 어때
And that we of course we are looking at the figure in the merit field as real, as actual, and as not simply a kind of a sample of a statue or some other pictorial representation. This is a fully three-dimensional reality that is occurring here, that the scene is one that is not static but incredibly dynamic, with countless emanations moving out from the heart center of the figure of Chenrezig, working to fulfill the goals of sentient beings, the aspirations of sentient beings, ripening sentient beings that are not yet ripened, further ripening those that are on the path of ripening. That this is happening like an incredibly busy intersection, very, very dynamic, 24/7, and that we kind of see that as something which is extremely then relevant, and something which is current, and something which is very actual, and that and to understand that this is happening because of that a particular quality of an enlightened being, both spontaneously and effortlessly.
What did the conversion? That the legend, and to any Casoda Takaja Raya, and the Jeres Yunde to get on that the issue and the shit Takaja to go to the Tarichi, the Tavalas water, the time you ended the tone, and the same Tamjig like. 딱 semje 탐제가 더 타지고 주에 딱 캐다도 고마 맞도 탐도 다 토바치기 is and 디체도 딱가지 되게 토바줄에 깨발라 캐다고 레발라 아니 딱가지 스타트 람라가 좀 발라고 요래 라고 요도 아니 딱가지 가서다 란제 아니 가서 디바다 디바 나사바디가 맞자다 치에 아니 초사티다다 초사 디바 차야 디체도 아니 야라도바 멘데다 쳐피 다 야라도바 멘데다 쳐피 된다 피 냥알이 밑에만 쏘았다 왔다 주고 보았고 왔으게도 남주 라마 탐에베 나바테 바티를 쏠라 거기 때발라자 냥알이 대 요바 있었지라 다는 라마 제레스 他们呢한국 넘버 이번 연상 两个人대화 뒤요 말인데 얘네야 나 주변으로 봐 나서 왔을 때는 야 맞다 버싱을 되게 섬지고 된 딱같이 저 주변에는 유튜브 봐도 고쳤다 대다 아니 저거 고야다 근데 맞다 버싱을 뒤요 이번 연상 아니 이체도 다 이거 주시도 공차 되게 여자 아니 대자 아니 다 강가를 밀지도 와 근데 저는 야가도 보면 되는 저 앞에 어떤 저
And so then, from our point of view too, at this point, recalling the qualities of an enlightened being, in particular this aspect of Chen Rezik, these particular compassionate qualities, how they relate to us, therefore bringing forth that sense of the triple faith of pure faith, manifest faith, and faith of conviction as well, and relating that to all sentient beings as well, understanding how it's necessary for me personally to really do something in order to relieve the sentient beings of their suffering, and therefore to attain that state of enlightenment becomes an imperative for me, that there is really no other choice but to attain enlightenment, because from that position I can best be able to fulfill the needs of sentient beings. And that in order to, of course, do that, I need to gain the necessary realizations along the path. That means being able to train in the path and to train with the least amount of free of, indeed, obstacles along the path. That means the purification of negativity and obscuration. And of course, that means we, at this point, engage in the seven-limbed practice. So, confessing our negativities, etc., making offerings. And in this particular context, too, because we are doing so to the aspect of Chen Rezik, we don't emphasize the limb of praying that they do not enter into parinirvana, but rather emphasize that they continue along their purpose of benefiting all sentient beings in countless different aspects, and that they, of course, keep turning to wheel of Dharma in order to do so as well. And that then we offer the mandala as well. And so this is, of course, in order that we are able to indeed create the most conducive conditions for our best being able to complete the path. Sikse di Nishutamba, ani rangi shedan drawa matulna, di rangi shedan, shokrang, rangi shedan drawa matulna, shiwal drawa julsing.
Wala so ta ta de lama chere se kom shiben ngana ta ka de janju sembe ta ka ta janju ka sembe to ni to be shira ni nyam sla te nyam lam ro ta ti mala wa tham le ba te de yin ba za lo ju ku shu te ta bu je nyam so mala na ta te ta bu je nyam so mala na ani ka so ta ka che ke se jo ba la chu shu la tu me ba ye sa wa ta chu shu la bi en je che ta ka ja logic issue tendency and it because to some chain la mache se kuma tubi some such what la mache se kom shibangane what the kuma she show what the chat rang ta go ma je sim je tham je ja ji da ri ju su dong gen ja shu kan la mache se ge an ku su to yi de tong shibangane and ta nga ra su na shen chen and pe la sa de nga ra su na shen chen de pa la mache se la ta ka ta ge da yi je mo de de ba yu de ge what the kuma she what the chat.
So then setting the scene correctly for our entering into the text, we of course remind ourselves that here we're training in the path of the Bodhisattva, trying to perfect all the practices of a Bodhisattva. This is combined with our training in the emptiness, looking into the wisdom of emptiness, and that seeing how this is so necessary. And that if we do not enter into this mind training, then we really cannot expect to perfect what needs to be perfected in order to attain enlightenment. That's the point from which we can benefit best sentient beings. And so here, mind training is a necessity for being able to enter into the practices of the children of the conquerors, in other words, the bodhisattvas. And that this then is necessary, not just for us, but in setting the scene, we also are aware that all of the sentient beings all around us, though denizens of the 6 realms of existence, they are able to cognize this scenario like we would, like a human being with that sense of intelligence. And so they are aware of the qualities of an enlightened being, like the body, speech, and mind qualities of Chen Rezig, and therefore, like us, they are looking towards the figure of Chen Rezig with that mind of faith, the faith of conviction, the manifest faith, and pure faith as well. So we begin at verse number 20, where it says, while the enemy of your own anger is unsubdued, though you conquer external foes, they will only increase. Therefore, with the militia of love and compassion, subdue your own mind. This is the practice of bodhisattva.
Children never give a year to make a run corner, tata mata, run tiki to the Mutundi, run, rangi, you do Matuane. Rangi Jumatu Yenta, and a dilatene, and a chiloge, and a never getting Suveta, Coca Browser, can't chene, and a round Mutino, and a Casa de Nomo, and Casa Mutuni get here, Nomo Mutino want to do it, and a dilated leg of Asa. Never saw the motor in the corner net, you'll take it one. You'll take it one. That day, children they came my rally member, rangi, rangla, and it took some about water that took some tea, and it came to Jugentilla, came to Jumaju Chen. Jumaju Chen, and it happened to Caso Jumaju Chen, and the church between yellow vegetal Tova, you know. And then new youth are painting it, children never get the new youth are painting it, you want to your one. The cousin was a mobile drop out the shit. And this is another one to Tanga North and children never get it to the Rangi, Jatamba, and a Dilla Capi Chan, and a Rangi, Nanglo de Dona Majevacha, and a Nanglo and Yomonte, and a pound to page. And a motor and a Kanga chat that you wanted to do. What is weird? Today is a Rangi Sheta, Tavo Matuna, so to Gula you 가서 대 녀몽게 다 소수길을 유배다 세상라 소바 되게 또 주다도 맞아야잖아. 먼저 7월 장가도 고콘에 치마이나 준남이야 두두고 말았어. 대체 근데 이봐 인상 두 마주가 칼 약해도 그렇지 뭐 차도 됐어. 뭐 차도 됐어. 나 앞에 지수 메라가 남다 지수다. 지수 메라 아니 가서 가서래 다 그런게 바바다 아마니데 바바도 총발했지 아니 총발을 잡지데 그런 충도 갈아 바바 통도 그런다 비자 보면 아니 근데 아구다 아니는 죄샤 아니 아구다 아니는 죄시다 아구다 아니게 아니 체도 아니 내가 먹고 아니 교자라도 수지 마테데 가서 전부 차사도 아니 교자라 수텔로지 땅가부 같이 뭐 차차에서도 아니 제주 잡라 아니 가와에도 먼저 저서 뭐보다 파망아 저대면도 저도 파제 하요 말했으니까 시에는 다까지 한번 째요 말와 마제도 아니 아마 술라바다 아니 투자 지지다 니마 아구다 아닌지 뭐다 제일 lumba 거라 자찬 아니 제도 오다 아니 투자도 그런데 뭐 먹고 째러다 내가 먹고 째도 아니 얘가 마가 아구다 아니면도 요마다 lumba 거라 마가게 찬 오다 갑자기 자다 들으면 줬어. 이제는 잡혀 주고 줬어. 아니 거기 냠레 라마 마반 제네 냠레 나네 아니 란규 주탑나 왔다 티르다 다 치르면 다 나라 유에 되겠지 아니 뒤뒤어도 자가 매워 찾지 그러봐 잠깐 이제 마보게 란규 주탑 제 되겠어 라리스 어떻게
So this verse is pointing out that there is no point really in trying to subdue our external enemies, and that because of the reason why we're still in cyclic existence and remain in cyclic existence has nothing to do with how external enemies are subdued or not. It has to do with the fact that our own mind is unsubdued. And that's the reason why we remain in cyclic existence. There will always be those that are harmful in the world. But if it was necessary to subdue all enemies, all external enemies, for bodhisattvas to be bodhisattvas, for Buddhas to be Buddhas, then no Buddha, no bodhisattva would exist, because there will always be remaining those who are harmful in this world. So it's a question of really our own mind stream remaining undisciplined and unsubdued. And this then is a kind of foundational condition for mental afflictions to take the opportunity to arise, because they are kind of adventitious in that sense. They will seize that opportunity we engage in the accumulation of negative karma, and so that keeps us constantly as permanent residents in cyclic existence. And so this is what we must change the emphasis. So regarding external enemies, and turn that focus inside to look at what the internal enemy is, and that comes down to the three poisonous attitudes of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And we should be able to get to know this reality of our inner enemies so well that when it comes to any external difficulty or enemy or a harmful person that comes into our time or our reality, that we can transform that whole scenario into a conducive condition for engaging in Dharma practice. This is the mind training. This is the only kind of purpose for external enemies. And so here it's important that we pay attention to our inner world, because if we don't have that habit, then of course that when there is a minor disturbance in there and we are not paying attention to it, it will just take off and become ever more disturbed, ever more negative. And that this is important then to forget about. In fact, this thing of pointing externally to the so-called enemies in our lives is nothing more than an act of self-deception. And because here we need to understand that trying to subdue the external enemies in this world is something that is counterproductive, as it says in the verse, though, while the enemy of your own anger is unsubdued, and though you conquer external foes, they will only increase. So we're saying that this is a counterproductive policy, and we must try to establish something more skillful, something wiser, something more beneficial. And that means that we take a totally different approach and work at subduing the enemies within, in our own mind stream. And of course, the life of Milarepa exemplifies this very, very well. If you know the story of the young boy Milarepa, who when he was very young, his father died, and then the uncle and aunt took over and took everything that they had, and left himself and his mother rather poverty-stricken. Then he grew up, became of age, approached his aunt and uncle again and said, "Now I am of age, I need to take over what's mine." And they again, fobbed him off, and then he became extremely angry as a result of that. And with the advice of his mother, he went off and learned the art of black magic and came back and cast spells that destroyed large parts of the village in which his uncle and aunt had lived. And with the result that his enemies, starting with his aunt and uncle, had now increased to the whole village who turned against him, and he barely escaped with his life. And so this was a major lesson for him. He realized that this idea of trying to destroy my external enemies is something that is counterproductive. And therefore, he started then the process of turning his attention inward to overcome the mental afflictions that and the enemies within, as it were.
Emotions so the by so the no by taking the sick to judge love to so the give you the give us that yin some jorwa sick to judge love the and pan no by to got that emotion in nature to some the mata in na you sent on the summer town in na pajo never can so the same but the same matu at same no more get there in a she said there was successful jungma 뭐좀 많이 봤잖아. 고해들 와. 고고를 뭐좀 많이 봤잖아. 좀 시대전에 대대이나 아니 거기서 자디가 갑자기 문에 뒤자기도 와. 이제 뭐도 삼삼 가서다 초화간을 치네. 아니 되게 아니 좀 대신에 삼로마다 하지. 아니 이모션 갈치 아니 디리체도 아니 지금 두자라나 파두자라나 아니 소소지 또 지금 캡탄라와 저 초대고 여러분들 좀제 야고 삼로다는 소소 마키바 차대도 소소 마키바 차대도 다 거긴 소소 루스다 오네잖아 얘네 든동한 것도 다네 가리를 뭐 쳐고 그래서 딱 것도 미스근데 가서 좀제 삼로다 두고 여래 아니 오네 이게 가리를 저 오네 중에 가리샤 뭐치 채두고 여래 안데네 당은 니게 니바디 배주 땅에 있는 뭐 쳐야 이거 좋아 뭐 쳐야 이거
Something that just to remark on that there is a sort of a line of thought, perhaps, that we get some sort of kick out of an emotional sort of kick out of revenge. In other words, if somebody says something nasty to us, when we're operating just at a very, very basic level there, if we think about it in any sense, we can see that actually nothing is achieved by that kind of behavior, and that both remain unhappy and indeed further upset ultimately because of that. And so this is sort of like saying that when our peace of mind is not established or not sustained, then it's a non-peaceful mind. Even if we think there's some sort of profit or gain that we've had because we have able to put somebody down, or indeed involved ourselves in some sort of reactive or revengeful behavior. When we look into that, when we really apply some reasoning to that, it makes us rather upset and uneasy and indeed even unhappy. And so we kind of go, we have to kind of start to understand that as a human being with human intelligence, with human capacity to reason, we have to get above this and beyond this sort of behavior, because with our human intelligence, we know we really can recognize what is genuine happiness, what is really suffering and not happiness at all. So we have to be able to make better choices in that regard, to say that if I engage in sort of a vengeful behavior, no matter how much kind of vicarious satisfaction I might feel I get from that, ultimately it's not a very wise course of action, because ultimately I'm creating more unhappiness in the world and I'm unhappy with myself.
단단의 그래서 치료 잡고 되신 폐와 조사 대체 좀더 잠다 인제게 마고게 아니 라디오 듣도 지고 그래서 어떻게 가장 먼저 참자야 소수게 다 내가 지금 지금 파 두자 말아봐 아니 팔을 내가 마이게 맞은 거 써봤고 와 되는 말에 잠바다 이제 거나 reflection 지금 소수 동기 남주 소수 동기 요 말와 파조대 동거로 와 아니 진짜 파 내가 개발 이나야 파 잠바다 이제 저 깨어도 아니 세 가서 갖다도 가서 소수 reflection 봐 당대 아니 배 시시 되와 전에 주도 아니 피게 dimbaile juate yoting 먼저 산다 파 두자 말라바 잡게 서바고 야보다래 야보래 대 이내 대당게 당게 뭐 가서 나로 마기 바 대대 reflection 야고 요마르와 아니 우당당데 야고 요마르 미다당데 야고 요마르 에 딜레테네 피게게 네바게 고도 구갑지나 고 네바게 되게 가서 마가바데 통되게 와 다데 잡아데 이제 고모도 아니 디 미게 따당 남주 아니 가서다다 저게 다지 차사 저게 미패 가서네 잠비 뒤에 들어왔다 인데서 아니 진짜 파조랑 셈해봐 아니 그밖에 고야지 나도 그 낭로를 잡 파조들 랑에 개체와서 잡았다 이제 세와도 그밖에 없어 아니 나도 그 가서네 랑식이 아니 디 제불라 남주에서 뺀 미스 야고 있다 주마 말다 politics에 많이 맞췄대 오늘 전에 아니 파조 밑에 가서 타겟 판매밖에 해봐서 삼삼 어디래서 마다 너가 시도해 그렇지 너가 시도해 이렇게 그래서 레말로 왔삼 아니 파두자 맞게 왔삼 야고다래 니만 거기 조직 저라 파니라고 요래 이 말아봐 야고시라 되다 이나야 그 새로와를 잡으면 좋아 나 잡아된 이제 검들 라래 코나 개체 왔어요 아니 그 내다 뱃 녹아줘 봐
The second two lines of that verse are that therefore with the militia of love and compassion subdue your own mind. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So here it's indicating the most beneficial response we can have to harm, to the so-called external enemy, and that here that it must be that our mind is completely infused with love and compassion, and that here, to respond to harm with harm, of course, we see as being unacceptable and unwise, but also that we cannot simply conclude that we kind of remain patient under somebody else as somebody else is harming us and are engaging in that kind of unsociable action. So kind of like just to be to remain silent, non-reactive, and patient is good, but in this particular verse it's saying it's not good enough. Here we have to respond on the basis of how well informed we are about the importance of the other, in this case, the one who is harming. That such is our concern for that person, that our mind is filled with a sense of love for them, compassion for their suffering. And that has to really be genuine. It must come out in our facial expression. It must be seen in the eyes. And if there is a smile, it can't be any kind of political smile, but something that is really genuine. And so if we have that, then everything about us, all of our feeling, all of our thought, all of our emotion in that sense is completely focused on really trying to benefit the other. And that, if that is seen in any sense by the other, that has a great ameliorating effect on their anger and that can be very, very effective in subduing their anger. And so it's very, very important that this is all really, it comes about through our meditation on the other being more important in this situation than ourselves. And that here, if that is the case, it's kind of like really we have to check every aspect of our response, in that, we have to be aware that our facial expression isn't, one of irritation, that there's no anger in the eyes, that there's no quickened heartbeat, and so on, that the breathing isn't labored, and all of this may be signs, even though we're a patient, that the other is saying that this person is actually really, upset. They're just not reacting. And so we kind of have to take it further. We have to up the ante in terms of what really counts as a bodhisattva practice.
당문에 잡아도 소소로 너가 지금데나 문에 잡아도 닝제 야고지 개와 이나다 되게 배제 용도고 말와 되게 용도 말 이나 당고들 내 당고 왔으게 들라가면 때대 요래 그게 용거 요때 이네 강에디 다가서라다 즉 가서 강에 잡아디 아니 가서 타바다 탐제 개봤다 산제 고마체 체도 잡고 요나다 왜 말와 당고도 전다 천에 매바지는 것도 깔라면 버려 다 쪼줘나 소애들 우리 같이 안에에 냐바다 신발 라소바 되게서 깔래 쇼리 자고다 다 제보데 다 코에 디게시보다 개요 말와 좋아 안 가비 강에 쇼지 왔다 강에 쇼지 왔다 좋아 이나야 다들 나도 최고도나 깔래 잡아대 깔래 잡아대 다 갖고다 땡기 디게시도 깔래 잡고 이제 마게 심제 탐제도 깔래 잡고 여봤어 지다be 그 갖고다 가병안에 좋아도 처음에서는 다 제도에지 아니 남지나 문에 잔주고 쌤 생이 타와지 깨서나 아니 강내 매딩 좀 그러다 요 그러다
So you can see how comprehensive this sort of response is, and indeed, as beginners, it's going to be quite a long time before we can really reach that point, of course, and that's understood, and that but we have to understand that being in cyclic existence, we're going to inevitably meet with problems. It's part and parcel of the deal here in cyclic existence, and that we have to square that up with our motivation to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so I was saying, where do I place the bulk of my energy? What is it, the priority here? As it says in the Bodhisattva's way of life, that people go through all sorts of hardships and put in so much effort just to fulfill worldly gain. And then that which keeps them in cyclic existence. But for those who put that amount of effort into the Dharma, if they did, they might have been enlightened already. And so it's kind of like we have to actually really just adjust our value system to really start to take delight in applying purest Dharma attitude we can in a situation like has been described. And that when we become, fully qualified, when we gain a fully qualified bodhisattva attitude, then we have no difficulties whatsoever in being able to deal with situations of harm and so on.
수사가 사실 정도라는 거에 봐요이나 아니 거에 당그 말했어. 딜레 소스 강바 한거 티들 거야 거지 가르게이나 아니 사실 탐제 아니 거에 요하는 집어 지장했어. 와다 랑이 뒤도이나 뒤도엘 배전 책이나 아니 샤바디가 강가 다 랑생이 시도했지. 다 와서 수고 하던데. Again,
as Master Shanti Davis says in the Bodhisattva's way of life, where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? But wearing leather and just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it, to avoid getting, bindies in my feet. So that this is the point here, that unruly beings are as unlimited as space. It says as well that here, rather than trying to subdue all them, how about subduing my own mind? And that's equivalent to subduing all those external enemies.
도나야 고스테보다 먼저 나도 더블링 지금 알아서 제가 그 조단다 되게 망고 줄에 때어도 아니 갑자기 자야 그까 지 가서도 지 가서도 치 달라 갑자기 자야 되냐 저 삼르면도 매르와 조선 차서 대당 되게 열와 다 되게 계속 건가를 먼저 삼르 스탄데 아니 당 알아서 이제 딱 야고 삼르 당에는 다 되게 그가 인제 유소 저래도 와 야고 삼르 당은 조선 쇼다 칼에 쇼자고 열에 칼에 쇼자고 다 소소 개가다 미리다 되는 순적이 세네다 칼에 쇼자고 열때 아니 조선 쇼장고 열때 다 타마타마다 그래처럼 직전에 다다 락자다 되게 소소세 소소저래 마음발 소소 가와 끼와는 거 하고 매와 소소 가 개가 그 뽀뽀 예사가자 다리 뭐도 개가 톱 전부 소버려서 아니 되게 천자 깡까배 누가 전부 깡까배 로소 딸 쎄쎄쎄 마음발 소소 끼어서 소소 다데 소소 갑자기 다들게 안 락자도 소소를 잡여 소소 찾으러 와 야고 삼았다 근데 그래 그가 고 호텔 가서 거기 있는 소소 루바들 끼에 말아 또 앞에는 아메리카 소리 거기 있는 아메리카 끼게 말아 아니 가라도 걔가 그때 채다 간가 급작 대켜 저 아니 소소 잡히기라 아니 소소 끼어도 다들 끼 렌데스 좀 들어봐
And so we have to kind of look around too and see how the world is playing out with regard to not adapting this kind of bodhisattva attitude. And we have to pay attention to what's happening internationally between nations. That when a dispute arises, how quickly it becomes something which is a military operation. And that then, that in kind of like the only way that certain nations seem to be able to deal with other nations is this kind of might. The might is right policy. And that means a military kind of like a way of opposing the other. And, there's so much kind of like, it takes up so much of the world's energy, resources, expense, not to mention the human cost. It's really quite amazing, really, how that this policy of a military action, first and last, is such a destructive element in the world, and even for the ones who are perpetuating this. And it's kind of really just from our point of view to see the whole thing is just an object of compassion. There's nothing else for it. That effort, that those resources, and that, the other sad and such an ironical kind of point about it is that, you get sort of this chest thumping, my nation is the best, most powerful, and that we have the greatest weapons, and we are nuclear this and nuclear that, and we have the most up-to-date, Air Force, etc., etc. And you're saying, you're kind of like praising your own country like that, say America, for example. But the fact of the matter is that, because of the law of cause and effect, it's very unlikely that you're going to be born as an American all the time. Next time round, you could be actually born in a country that is an enemy of America. And so then, like, the weapons that you supported all that time as an American are going to be turned against you next time round. And so it's a very bad bet, really, to be supporting a military might, because next time around, it's actually more likely that it will be turned against you. and so you become the enemy of that country. And so you can see how it's an act of actual ultimate self-deception, really. Any support for the military, it really is an act of self-deception in terms of karma.
뭐죠 대 가서 뭔가 말이 베스인 되어네 아니 지금 세대 캐버도 세대 내다면도 가지는 말고 세대 내다래 리미테이션으로 와 아니 겨와 저마다 가봐주고 다 레기 롱게 되네 아니 지금 예바 싸워니는 요 말이 미리 카나라 요 말이 개갑라 요 말이 아니 미다 둔도다 다 야와 이달 가봐게 그러면 가야 예바 매되겠지 가야 예바 매되겠다 너도 레 예바 먹고 싸서나 아니 소소 레 싸바디 사니 전개 좀 샤바데 아니 소소 갈에 잡여서 차대 다들 라야 되다 가봐게면 하고요 말 아니 소소 자티 소소 개가 또 쳐보 일라 마오발 소소 개도 되겠게 아니 소소 갈 잡여서 내가 요다 다 내가 정말이잖아. 나 인제 유로 왔다. 계속 다니 전부 다 문에 전화스요다. 문에 전화 인제 유다. 뭔가 말이 배 샤와 쪽. 샤잖아. 거라 장고 인라그 중고인가 스마트 인라그래. 인라그래 와. 다 데르 내다도 어떻게 그거 뭐지 심마 제거도 개점을 봐. 심마 제거 개점을
And so we have to admit, really, isn't it? It's actually more kind of like how do you say, it stands out, more pressing than we even kind of imagined, that this life of ours so predicated on our own confusion and ignorance. This life situation, this one life situation, is such a limited viewpoint, such a limited way of thinking about things, that when we die, we're going to be reborn. Where we go is of far more importance. We have no idea where the winds of karma will take us. To a country maybe that is completely defenseless, or we can't even fend for ourselves, or a hell being, or a hungry spirit, or whatever. We have no kind of like a certainty about where we will end up. And so it's kind of like it's rather pathetic, really, that you kind of put so much emphasis on how well prepared we are for war, and dedicating so much of the economy towards that end, and so on and so on and so on, where you will have no idea where you end up in the next life. And the tragic irony is that you could end up as the arch enemy of the country that you've been helped to arm. And so that those bombs are going to be falling on you next time round. How pathetic is that? So therefore you can see that it's a complete deception, and therefore that attitude is actually an object of compassion. So this is really nothing more than is laid out in the law of cause and effect. This is the way it is.
Pena chacha wena nyama yuwa ta lamlim nalona chari boge ide goshin so de ane mizaji papa strong jena ta combat chile nyazaji wacha kasa de peace point sire nyazaji wacha and nyasimbe ane papa de ane de nyasimbe onge de ledi onge ane nyalke amade kambal sem chane ane de kasa de mizaji kileke ane pugu de kora baba de bude chansa jade baba second je jade ane pugu mizande pugu leke ane pugu ye sa chmo shiwo nyane ta chari pugu ji se de ta ga da pasha sa che mala so ta nyam ta bo pa do nya so su baba second jade pa do nya ane mala so amala so ta amaru go sa ga yorwa ki ke de ra ane so ta 아니 아마디가 루바사가 소디 루바사이데 소디 초가디 겨와게 마디 소디 초가 차데어라 디 냐르케르 디 루바데사 룰 워데르 전 파자서 말차 워데르 전 다가자 워데르 다 셔리부도 코에 촐레 겸부다 코에 촐도 문에 너 겸을랑게 소리 두서 뭐 이때 가요 네, 다 되네. 다 알아네. 너도 다 좋대요.
So you remember that particular incident which Venerable Shariputra witnessed in going into a particular house and seeing the different karmic relations between the members of that house, where the previous father was very fond of fishing, and that there's a pond at the back of the house, and he actually died when he was killed. He ended up being born as a fish in that pond. That the mother of the house, being very attached, was born as the dog, which is now the pet dog in the house, and the son and wife in the house were cradling a baby with great tenderness, who actually is the rebirth of the enemy that killed the father in the first place. And that now, in the situation that Shariputra witnessed, that the son had gone and in following in his father's footsteps, has fished in the pond, caught the fish that was his father, and was eating it at the table. That he was throwing the bones to the dog, who was his mother, and he was cradling his enemy in his lap. And Shariputra said, cyclic existence is really, it's such a kind of a ironically funny situation.
어디로 다 되는데 뭐 삼로 야고지 마다나 소소 고가탄도 당도 고가 마디 와지 게치죠 와 좋아.
So if we don't think carefully on our own responses and reactions, there's every chance that we are indeed deceiving ourselves. We are deceiving ourselves, and it's most important that we try to proceed without that kind of like a self-deception.
뭐지 밀라 미셔바 지금 고가 땅에서는 커미티 장고미도 미티 고가 땅을 달라고 와. 미 장고미도 라고 와. 미셔바 고가 땅에 샤이 말 소소 고가 땅어.
So we like to point out how another person is deceived or fooled. You know, we say, they swallow that hook, line, and sinker. They're not very clever. But we are far less aware of the degree to which we fool ourselves and deceive ourselves. And that's something that really behoves us to become a lot more clear on.
네, 아니 딜라 티요 말이. 미 셔바지 고가 땅 미지 장고미도 라나. 다 소소로 고가 땅 갈라고.
So yeah, again, it says that. So we're very quick to point out the other as a fool for deceiving themselves, but when it comes to fooling ourselves, there's no word that describes that, is there? We don't have words for that.
근데 여자 뭐죠? 야고서 삼렀다나? 뭐죠? 가서데 제 제가 또 전부 여기 리더만 뭐지? 락자다 천자다 저들 강에서다 들 개처부 뜨는 저긴데 또 삼을 야고 있잖아. 소소 고가 땅데나. 뭐 삼을 야고 좀 마다나? 그래도
So when we think carefully on this, you know, we look into the greatly powerful, the leaders of the incredibly powerful countries, dedicating so much of the resources of that country to weapons, the increasing in military might. So we can see actually there's just a really profound sense of deception, self-deception going on there.
어쩌네. 다 이내 다 대중 어들 태가 어들 간도 다 소소 고가 맞아 제 개체부 다 당하라도.
And so we got of course that's by the way what we are more pressing to really pay attention to clarify is the degree to which we are deceiving ourselves.
당하라도 답에 요다 전부 쉬우다 그요 말다 이내 다 말아도 좀더 틀려 유배게 아니 지금 초단 나조래 아니 조금 나조래 아니야 하마 빈자 나라래 야나 소소 틀려 유배게 다 동바친데나 좀더 또 큰에 제대로 것도 삼로 만나와 이렇게 저버려 봐 뭐도 쉬우리 자치 뭐 쉬우다 뭐도 쉬어 요 말에 당고도 망제 가서 님 초대 되게 이내 당고도 내가 저 소소 틀려 유배데 너무 깨치도 모두 락자소에 내가 요 말에 모두 내가 이제 말아주게 수 실로네 라라 틀려 요게 듣고 요게 다 라라 저와 요게 아니 깨지 채나 남자 너무 깨치도 요도 아니 지들 당고도 당고도 sabta 지디 깨치 못 되는 거 말아줄라 practical way.
And so of course thankfully we're really mostly not capable of in doing too much trouble, engaging in too much trouble. We don't have a cache of weapons, so. But what is really pressing for us, and what is really telling in all of this, is that we must be extremely careful in all of our relations with those around us, our relatives, our friends, our parents, our close ones, our circle, and that we must try to, as much as possible, proceed in a non-mistaken way in responding in situations like that. And therefore, because there will be issues arising and mental afflictions will arise, we have to be extremely careful, be mindful and aware at those times in order not to fall under that influence, and to be able to always give our most enlightened response.
다 잠다 이제 마보게 라디오 뒤탑치네. 와다 뒤지도 라는 틀에 이제들 뒤 공부잖아. 아니 저거 내가 다 자체다 틀에 타이로 막 있으면 제도 좀 봐. 어떻게?
And so, as the verse says, therefore, with the militia of love and compassion, subdue your own mind. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. And so our training ground is with our circle, for those around us, our relatives and friends and so on. And then, of course, as we perfect that, our responses in that regard, we spread that out to include all sentient beings.
당가로 내 당고라 그게 마투베 강에 용거다 마투베는 몰음 순제 때문에 어디들이 용토가 줬어. 몰음 순제 때문에 제대로 마투베들라 아니 시기 장소 소소 투고 마투네 시기 맞네 봐 라데 아니 용토가 지고로 숨거다 람가시 요마르와 대화 두고 요래 동에 두고 요마다 람가시 요마르 람가지레 좋아 choice made.
And so that as beginners, we have to kind of be both modest in what we can do, of course, but also honest in our reactions. And therefore, at times, we have to resort to just aspirational prayers. May I be able to respond in a more enlightened way in the future? May I make a better choice in the future? And say, we cannot kind of forget that we're on the path. This is not a choice. We have to kind of know where we are on the path and respond to the best of our ability. But we're always aspiring to better, to be making a much more enlightened response.
And sigma잖아 되었잖아. 아니 소소 검치 자도가 지고라서 간절을 아니 지금 타바다 탐지자와 봐줘. 세til에 이네 아니 소소 기와 바페와 조금 망아. 니 기와 칼라 심바 요걸 왔어. 너무 있겠다나 기부 뒤나면 요마르와. 너무 있잖아 남의 기부 요마르. 최kel레 말이 개바가요 요마르. 출로 가리네 개바가요 요마르. 수이 말은 미리카나 개바가요 요마르. 에시아 땅 유럽이 개바가요 요마르. 너무 있잖아 마이기바 이거 찍어지잖아. 부터 보면 개바 요마르. 너무 있잖아 부터 보면 가이나 개바 요마르. 너무 있잖아 수이네 기부 요마르.
So we have to kind of like really understand that the words that we are using, when we talk about wanting to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, and aspiring to the best we possibly can be, that we have to live by these words. There's a deep meaning there, and that it means that we're making better choices, that we're not cowing in front of the mental afflictions and just allowing ourselves to be taken on and controlled by the mental afflictions. Certainly not. And so we can understand the difference between them as well when we are, displaying more love, more kindness, more compassion, that we have better relations with our friends. We have more friends. We are increasing our circle of those in which with whom we get along well with. And that we can see the opposite way. If we're operating through the mental afflictions, then our circle of friends is going to diminish, and we're going to have more difficult relations even with those who remain with us. And we can see that this is a universal kind of truth, that regardless of who you are, where you are, whether you're in Europe or America or Asia, whether you're male or female, operating via mental affliction is equal to suffering and conflict. There is nothing really positive that you can say about it for anybody.
너무 뒤에 딱 그저 맨날 찍대서 맨날 다다 소개 납조 찍대서 아니 지금 이게 제 장가들 포스터스 전에 인도 하고 도와 맞지 아니 지금 컴 뒤쪽에 또서 돼야 삼로당 또서 저 삼로당 또서 저 삼로당 와이나 삼로당 와이나 팽글 와 아니 찍지 않는 양다 라기 가서다 라기 차단 또 맞으나 실을 또就是표하죠 대체 잠깐 인제 마보게 라지도 제설 나리에서 어떤 지금 당을 직님보 전다야고 아니 샘띵 내지 구마리에치 그거와
So, of course, then the job is to subdue our mind to really pacify the element of mental affliction that is so prevalent in our actions and in our choices. And in that regard, we need inspiration. And this verse actually serves as a wonderful inspiration. We want to write it out and place it up above our altar, and that we could contemplate on that during morning meditation. Very few words, very full of meaning. The meaning itself is non-contradictory. And so it's kind of like, while the enemy of your own anger is unsubdued, though you conquer external foes, they will only increase. Therefore, with the militia of love and compassion, subdue your own mind. This could be, something which is very inspirational for us, something to encourage our minds. Likewise, if we're in a bad mood or slightly depressed or unhappy, to be able to see this verse or to recite this verse, I think it has great pacifying effect on the mind to really bring peace to the mind to us. Verse number 21. Sensual pleasures are like salt water. The more you indulge, the more thirst increases. Abandon at once those things which breed clinging attachment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas.
노트라야 건가 되려 뒤뒤대바도 좀 맞으나 아니 자그리 감지 자그리 징그리 다 가리네 지그러 왔다 뒤돈달라 아니 뒤돈달 것도 갈래 자그여다 수준이 수답지 갈래 자그다 뒤돈다 뒤부에쳐도 소주 대바도 뒤부에쳐도 뭐든 다디 개쳐보시다 뒤가자 론체 왔다게 가자 다가 고금부터 차나도 야고 싶죠 와 론체 다가 고금부터 이납스 좋아요 말 거서 가끔 대도 갈라 아니 저 타고지 사자셔 마 통하이나 카드다 넘버지어데 아니 콤바디 세트가 양도 망아토요 양도 망아토라 모두 칼라에 다가도 칼라 삼먹고 저도 뒤니까 주먹고 싶던 거고 와 주먹고 싶던 거다 대두고도 강에 채우고 와 왔다들 진짜 그 론체 저도 딱 간다 이래 딱 이제 문제 거고 얘네는 건데 줄 로가되면 또 재미지 이 개체 뭐 맞는데 또 개체 뭐서 이 샤워도 마다 있잖아. 그래서 콜라 가자 좋아이네. 아니 그 가서 간장전에 딱 가자. 딱 직수 산다 가요 맞다. 직수 산다 딱 코라 소소게 가서래. 빼는 가서다. 빼는 것도 지금 뺀줘라 도나 지게인데 아니 그 뺀줘 도나 제 간장도 이 차이 뭐도 아까 뒤에 거야 되겠어. 다 소소게 미세되게 타잖아. 다고 다 쳐버려. 이 다마저도 소소 생각을 지금 가서데 이 샤워도 만들어 제일 샤샤 매디가 속주고 봐. 다돼서 거기 나라도 류다 되게 뭐도 다 상체가 류데 아니 류인데 될라지가 사야 토에 자서도 되게 한국을 요래. 저용기 지금 거고 요래. 이내 라 저용기 샤워도 맞죠. 저용기 샤워도 좋나? 저용기 조금 차도 봐. 저용기 조금 차도나 대형 요구 차소나 아니 되네 타도 말 가서는 제요소로 차로 어떤 제요소로 가서 다 되네 탈에 매고 이 요구 차네 탈에 매고 어디 차도 와 어디 차도라 빼는 것도 타바다 탐지 좀 파쇼 지금 송가마를 할게 개발라야 송가발 할게 개발라야 아니 삼대 무시고 부도 삼대 무시 마게 바이나 송가발 할게 도 가서 저번에 탈게 요 말와 저번에 타고 요 말다 저번에 타발라 아니 대백이 연대라 끼어 통고도 와 이 끼어 통네 아니 딜레 예발 중에 아니 예발 중에 아니 가서 딱까지 셴에 거 아니 삼대가 연대다 아니 그 대백 끼어 때잖아 아니 딜레 딱까지 딜레 착바 제고도 와 딱 타바다 탐지 좀 봤을 때 시험 먹어버려 그래서 코알라 차대에 코알라 착배 온 거와 코알라 착배 온 거. 다 딜레지 타고 그도나 이 착바 들려단 거를 뭐다 딜레 자기라 코알라 타서 용해 걸어 요 말고.
And so this verse points us out as the denizens of the desired realm, so named because we very much adhere to the objects of the desire senses, and that here what we smell, what we taste, what we touch, what we hear, and what we see can lead to gain, attachment on our part. In other words, we fall too much under the influence of the objects of the senses, and that in this case we can spend so much effort, engage in so much hardship, and indeed engage in so much conflict trying to possess these objects of the senses, and that in pointing out that following that trajectory is kind of leads to no ultimate satisfaction. There's never enough, and that it's compared to drinking salt water. That you're never satisfied. It only increases your thirst. You want more and more and more. So it's like that. Attachment breeds attachment. And that this is saying that this is really counterproductive. But it's not saying that we don't need the necessities of life. It's valid to be able to work to be able to cater to this contaminated body, and therefore it needs to have food, needs to be fed, needs to remain clean and hygienic and so on. And that's but it's saying here that we so often overdo it, and that we go to give it too much importance, and therefore it's really falling under the negative influence of our attachment. It's like wealth. Those who concentrate on the accumulation of wealth. Again, there's really no limit. It's very unusual to have somebody who's chasing down wealth who can say, "Okay, that's enough. I'm fine with that." It's something that kind of that attachment breeds attachment again, and that if we are falling under the overarching influence of any sort of objective like that, following the objects of the senses and so on, and indeed that means just catering to the needs of not just the needs, but what the perceived wants of the body are, etc., etc. Then we're really under that power, and that means that we become a slave to that object. And that slave then understands that there is no freedom in that scenario, that you really are a slave to your desires, to your attachments, to your clinging, and that there's no freedom. And so you can, forget about attaining liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. Forget even about attaining the higher realms, form and formless realms, because that requires, particular meditative concentrations. Here you are, so mired in adhering to or catering to the objects of the senses that you are just a slave, and that in order to gain any sort of advance from the desire realm, the first requisite is to see the faults of the desire realm, and to lose that clinging and to gain a certain aversion for the objects of the desire realm. And so this is then leads you to meditate in that sense, to understand that there's nothing really anymore that can appeal to you in the desire realm. So you develop the meditative concentration leads to, say, the form realm or something like that. This is how we advance on the path. But we have to understand that cyclic existence is attachment. And there is always this attachment associated with cyclic existence. And so therefore, the job is to really counteract this attachment at all times.
다른 알아도 남주 지금 가서도 직대 연락이 오다 가서 대여서도 대여서 대여대 직전에 그 본부대 제발 넣어줘나 대여 많이 받쳐줘 그래 야나 미지대 제발 넣어줘나 대여 많이 받쳐줘 다 대백이 가서 되길라 다 대여라 차배 차바디 아니 못으네 대발라 깨대네 아니 대배 대여 차디도 그 사람들 쓰라고 봐도 다디 출로 미지요는 그 타바서의 리버레이션 제 요마다 소수 제국도 이 간데스 연구도 오 디들라 차발라 되는 연구도 차발라 되는 연구도 아니 다 차발라 되는 연구도 아니 디 대역이 그 토네 대역이 그 토네 아니 들라 마차바체에서 그 대외 유도 고발을 쓰고 요 말에 들라 마차바체네 아니 거라 나라도 공부를 하면 고바들 롱체네 아니 들라 마차바 토네 롱체 다 착스도 되는 거 아니 가서 이 상황도 실사 봐. 이 상황도 먼저 왜 토네 아니 롱체
So so in a worldly sense, of course, we have a list of necessities in order to be able to live a life, even in the desire realm here. But what is being pointed out that as long as we have attachment to the objects of the desire realm, we are always going to be born back into the desire realm. And there's no kind of escape from that. And so that this is counterproductive to what we're trying to do. And so we have to really recognize here that this attachment is something that has to be opposed at all times with all of our energy. And it's kind of saying here that, it's not that we completely disavow all kind of objects of desire, and that they're all, there are kind of things that we must make use of in order to live a good life, to live a life. What we need to be able to understand is that we can make use of these objects without the attachment to them. And this is most important because attachment is lack of control. We are not in control when we're attached. We are under a pernicious influence when we give into attachment. So that's to see, it is possible to make use of these objects free of attachment, and that's what we should aim to do.
가서나 차수나 되네 탈게요 말이야. 되네 마다나 딜레 디기 채와 아니 캄봄에 디기요래. 딜레 디기 채와 탑에 디기요래. 딜레 디기 채와 탑바다 탐제 겸에 디기요래. 아니 디게 디게지기도 와. 타마타마다 소소로 누구도 와. 단단 소소 그때 단단지 동해질라 디기 뭐였는 대대왔다. 예. 랑토도 딜레 차원도 가리 오그랬으나 애네 디 채도 가리 이네 지기다. 그는 어쩌다 그는 캐피탈리즘 그는 가서 마제릴로게 아니 잡히게 좋다 되게 왜 중에서 가리네 지기 소리 좋아 다 디소를 자기로다 자기로 다디想法的 시발 와 마자기 想法的 처럼 마자기 벤조소에 저도 가리네 지기 지외 자고 자기도 와 what is 이 想法的 just deal 왔다
So we have to see that this attachment to stuff is that which actually harms us. We have to see it in that sense. that the so-called happiness that comes from objects of the senses, like this attachment, I mean, to that is a hollow kind of happiness. We're aspiring to attain the happiness that arises from the meditative absorptions of the former formless realm, the happiness that arises when we attain liberation from cyclic existence, the happiness of the fully enlightened state of the Buddha. This then is sort of like saying this to be actually clinging to this kind of sense of attachment is something which is really counterproductive. It's something that really harms us. It's like capitalism. Like I was saying here, the objective of capitalism is that everybody is in a state of constant happiness through having stock, through concentration on product. And so, that the gross national product is the kind of like the goal of these kind of countries which adhere to this system. And so it's kind of like this saying you concentrating the actual well-being of the nation on the relative wealth of all the people in that country, which is really not just impossible, but indeed counterproductive to real happiness.
Somebody Yongzo social oina ya, Kaya Yomar, Taba Tamikabal Tobel, Partichimare, Partichimare. You got a somebody Chigo, but the Yobadi Chigo.
And so
open a power second, global comma, the Payu, to Tawamaja, the Naked Amara Punks, till a chapa the power, yes. Chapa power on it, and then global the long chana, global the cover, come take him a julep with it. Take Chigamare.
And so here in the second part of that verse 21, it states, abandon at once those things which breed clinging attachment. So it's actually not referring to, discarding all your possessions because they're a danger or something to us. Here, it's not talking about getting rid of stuff. It's actually saying abandon the attachment, abandon the clinging attachment. This is the important part of it, that quality of desire that is so debilitating. That's what we must overcome, not the things itself. In fact, you can become the owner of all of the produce in the world, and it will not be an obstacle to your attaining liberation or the omniscient state of enlightenment if you are free of attachment. And that's how definite it is. All of those possessions will act as a positive, conducive quality for your practice and never become a fault, because you have absolutely no attachment.
Rang get with Jusayata, Shenga to the Jusay, Lekavado, Shenga to the Jusay, the Kakamare, Shenga to the because of the 20 to the Kakamare. That rang it on that gets with the child, and the Kojueta Rana, because Kogu, but to get the Chikuyo, but Shenga to the time of my messenger, I'm taking it. So that is because let up Bello Hacha, the Koska, Kogo Koran get them at the Pember to bank get at the one.
So it's like the emphasis on either my own self-importance or the importance of others. We have this thing to my needs, my wants, and so on as being so important, and this is something which is completely counterproductive. But that we lose nothing by being giving to others, and that sort of uh, considering the other as the one which is most important, and in kind of they are standing in for all sentient beings, and that whatever we do to satisfy them, to bring happiness to that other, we should do. That's what's the key thing, most important thing here. It's not the object that we may give, but actually the act of generosity, the benefit that may accrue.
소소로 고고 요바데 마차베 토네 론체나 아니 뭐부터 닝불렌 두고 도와 뭐부터 닝불렌 두고 도와 닝불렌 도다 차바 디가 때네 아니 다 녀무케기야 고지 체험부 도와 왔다 가자 지금 되차셰 당신 되차셰다 디가 되고 되차셰다 디 가서는 고티치고로 가서다 나라 쪽에 가서다 동행기 중사겠다 시사적 들어와 시사적 들어와 시사적 다 동네 중사게 싸워적 들어와 어디다 다 되고다 근데 도자셔다 뒤에 파파 두어데 가봐 두고서는 아니 가서다 다 가자 가서다 가서 마리발라 두어고 도와 마리발라 두어고 와다 가자 지가 투사대 마리발라 두어고 그래 왔다 어때 다 뒤에서 싸워 다 마리베 꾸는라네 아니 독숨데 기억보다 독숨나다 당고저 다다데 되샤데 뭐저 계속 통고요 말다 콘로다 셰다스 이거 짜리 다스 그게서 되샤스 근데 나라도 지금 편바 죽고 이거 소라치 와 다들 가서 지금 소소라 튕게 죽고 이거 소라치 아니 내가 뭐좀 거거 되게요 다 거고요 뒤에 당고저 지금 가서 아니 지금 도나 약고 좀 맞아봐 이나 아니 지금 가서 되자 이거 소다 편바 주고 이거서 나와 책을 또 여기서 나와 책을 요마로 와
When we are able to use objects free of attachment, then we are able to actually take the essence of those objects. And that here, that we have to understand that the attachment is a mental affliction. We always hear about the three poisonous attitudes of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, and how attachment and aversion are motivated by that ignorance. When we see aversion or hostility or anger like that, it's very clear for us. We can say, oh, that's bad, that's negative, that's clearly so. But we have to be careful, because when we often see attachment, we might see, oh, that's something which has good quality. That's a desirable thing. And in that sense, we have to be able to understand that the deceptive nature of attachment, it fools us into thinking that there's some benefit out of following this line of attachment, and that you see, it would have to actually understand why it's counted as one of the three poisonous attitudes, and that it is completely faulty, and that any good thing we see in attachment is self-deception. 아니 다른 것도 월기 에코노믹 다 망고 셰드 되샤티 베다 에코노믹 기대 셰드 요말다 디가 가 디가 나라도 되샤 요발라 때네 아니 컴퍼니 속에 아니 나라도 대박이 되샤 계산 유디가 코도 좀 맞지기도 와 전에 아니 캡다 지길을 찾잖아 캡다 지길 때데 지길 때나 밑에 대박 수거래 때데 지길 때는 저 딸 코도 가서 사이콜로지 찾아 하고 다 코도 samlo dodan chata ha botan ene ko de kepta chita da ko so da ene raho ne ba yo ko ye chi so ngu dwa what did it and so you can see how deception, or sorry, how bringing attachment works indeed fuels the world's economies. How someone runs a company, very clever with their advertisements and so on, making out that they're producing something very useful, very good, very beneficial, and so on. And that here, behind it all, the objective is to get rich, to amass money, and that. But the psychology of business is the psychology of attachment, and that here we have to understand that this is what's at play here.
Apple 12 years then so Apple not to drink a pen mobile phone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is a good thing. That lot of what is much you go so shit.
Yeah, the Apple psychology. That's right. The iPhone kind of that sort of strategy by Apple is a great example where you have to enslave the buyer by producing a new model of iPhone every other year, and that you have to have it. You have to have the latest version, even though the difference between it and the last version is minuscule. Yet, you're what they're doing is feeding on that attachment, that desire.
甚至他们这个都是3.5嘛，主跟也是跟经文的代表一样。我到底这个long结果有吧呢？强化，但有吧？那输出的没嘛，所以他们去摆出结果一起。这样当然是连接差这个有的吧，连接差这个有的。我觉得。
So what's most important though is that in the goal that we have of really working to benefit all sentient beings, that it really is our responsibility to be able to make use of whatever we have without attachment, free of attachment, or to reduce our level of attachment as much as possible in the goal, with the ultimate goal of eradicating attachment completely. And that is a really an implicit responsibility for anybody working to benefit all sentient beings.
我那都在我那在好过嘛，像我那知道这个告诉严重的、长生的、养大的、大话都是讲的，安尼考了也不做严重见的，安尼这个啥那个大话呀，见我的，安尼当年我说的多，讲究个审句了的，这些的，我觉得考把人你把跳了吧，但恰上好过多一点，你把有个月的，这个这看几个月，已经没这考把就是等过的，smart 里面说几个月了吧，但是我说那就马上没叫。但这是高考的了，真的就是高考的。第二，安尼搞的，安尼把家条的顶上就永远有把这个做到那嘛就不吃。安尼大家人就了这个搞的根本就是个最大的，我们对吧？大家人第三面都看都没把第三面都看嘛多吃。我那知道，第二他呢，安尼这个看不嘛有的，看不嘛个这个，安尼我写的这个，安尼把看把个要嘛的。가봐야 하고 아니 저 샘제에 대 돈다 하고 두고 그것이 가라가다 시청 보여라. 전에 다 지금 가서데 장세에 다 자주세바 토람 졸람 다 토람 데발려서나 다 빼때 장기 류 자주 두고 깨지지라. 상계 신자로 또 두고 요래. 다들 애들 스타니발라 되는 똥을 또 두고 되네. 다 자자 야페네. 아니 상계에서는 아니 다 가자 지금 그래서 투가절로 구가절로 투이참데 다가자 지금 시부지 누가 처음부터 요르데 이는 알아서 로유로 마셔 몽배 온게 마시 맞지 아니 다들 코에 내다 소소 통에 다가라 가서 처음 소라들 고파니 어디서 스테이고 요르마다 디큐어 와다 디큐어
So it's also like really to understand how the degree to which we are deceived by our own attachment here in our kind of beginner state. That as we develop an understanding, particularly of renunciation, and then move on to really understanding, the true nature of reality and developing our correct view of emptiness. And developing a broad attitude to be able to include all sentient beings in the mind of enlightenment, and proceed higher and higher on the path, gaining a deeper, more subtle and broader view of reality. Then we will no longer be so deceived by attachment. We'll not need the objects of attachment, that we kind of like have clairvoyance and so on without the need for phones anymore. You can communicate with others just through clairvoyance itself. And so here it's kind of like understanding that the degree to which we are in a way blinkered in our attitude towards possessions, to the objects of the senses and so on, and that how we need to reduce that, leave that behind as we proceed along the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, and indeed the path of seeing, upon which then we attain that direct realization and the first ground of bodhisattva simultaneously, where there we can go to 100 different places to hear teachings from 100 different teachers, and make 100 different emanations and so on. So you can imagine there that that sort of concerns we have over objects of the senses and our kind of a tunnel vision, our short-sighted attitude towards possession becomes completely irrelevant at that point. And then on the second ground, everything is increased by 10 as you go up along the ground and so on. And so your concerns are far more broad-minded, far more profound at that point. And so these kind of pettiness of our clinging is something that is long gone at that point. And that's something that we should bear in mind, and that therefore it's necessary for us to become aware to the extent to which this clinging attachment maintains a short-sighted, blinkered attitude on our part, and how much it interferes with our progress on the path.
Pero dimo wata ngarazo tanda döbe milike da döbe har ke waina döbe har ne mas te bana döbe mi ki chaksa yu do a kanche ne chagi yena ta chobun duga samta du burwa ta de sunga ba te so ke döbe ha ke so ke chaksa de ta cho gayo chaksa ke mindu a samta tenga de ke tawo jobu non de dane 이게 나한테 가서 타바 탑게 얘랑 다 좀 맞춰서 다지 되게 송가마다 송가가라 다 대차는 가르쳐야 돼. 가야 누구가 썼었지. 내가 이제 그거 연대기 차 같이 좀 그러다. 내가 삼재 잡아 탑게 되게 타바 탑게 다 타바라 참저 가야 돼. 라인도야 타마지 견도야 타마지 다 가야 돼. 좀 그러 어디다 되래. 그래서 내가 마시면 오게 그래서 천박을 배반했지 천박을 배반했지 사파라니 같이 뭐 주지 된데 그러와 다시 소리데.
We can see too, as if we were to look from the point of view of even a desire realm celestial being, what we here in the desire realm are so concerned with, what we are so attached to, would appear completely pointless from their point of view. It's like, well, why are they so obsessed? Why are they clinging so much to that stuff? That means absolutely nothing to me. They've completely lost that level of attachment. And then, as I say, looking from the viewpoint of a form realm being in meditative absorption at what the desire realm celestial beings are obsessed with, they look on that and going, pointless. Why are they so obsessed, these desire realm celestial beings? That is just pointless. It does nothing for me. And likewise, as you go up through that, the different stages on the path and attain the state of liberation of an arhat, they look at what the desire, the form realm and the formless realm beings are emphasizing so much and go, absolutely nothing. That means nothing to me. That's irrelevant. From what they have achieved, it looks like nothing. And then from the point of view of a fully enlightened being, they're looking at the arhat who has attained liberation and going, that that being hasn't even fulfilled their own purpose, let alone the purpose of others. So it's kind of like as your mind becomes so much more capable, and you really start to fulfill the potential of a fully enlightened being. And then what came previously is kind of almost like an object of embarrassment when you were, so obsessed with things at a lower level. And now you can see that how pointless that was, and you looked right through them.
Samba jachi jong redo samlo gaze tang to me samlo jachi jong de ta de chu di de go in de jong so da bena pakwa ina pakwa khora de sa pak sang ji wo ta ki wo shu ji ya wo shu ji je de go yor ba ngara de ta no ta cho cho le yo mar ba ta dina de khala de kan sa ko se ba pakwa ji wa tama de ko se je wa chi da di what
so it's like so you really look into it's kind of like the capacity for thought that we're talking about, the degree to which one can think deeply and broadly, and it gives one perspective that one otherwise doesn't have. So, say for example, if we look at the life of a domesticated pig, you think say as happy as a pig, we say they have enough to eat, they have a place to stay, but we know ultimately they're only being fed in order to be killed, ultimately. So their happiness does nothing for us. We have a much bigger perspective on life than a pig has. And likewise, for those who are farther ahead on the path, when they look at our concerns and what we get so upset by and fuss over, it looks rather silly from their point of view. So you really need to be able to view these issues from many different points of view in order to make unmistaken conclusions with regard to them. So let's leave it there for today. But if anybody has any questions, you can ask now. No questions, looks like.
Oh, yeah. That and the Takaja Rangu Dundela Lama Chenese set about it and Rangi Chivola, Pema, the Nimata Tavet and Santa, Yajo Chase Yanta, the Tower suggests what to sell and Lama Chenese Chantana, Rangi Chivola, but it's a number of Tagichua from the Kanya Kuzu to the Mujosato Sundechena, Tabukas, Nibaka, Subas of Tendution, Sanja Komamato, over the Chelsea, Sons of Okobashe.
So then we bring our mind to focus again on the figure of Shinrezik in the space in front, while establishing an appropriate seat on our own crown of a lotus arising from brief meditation on renunciation, the sun disk arising from contemplation on the wisdom of emptiness, and the moon disk, a mandala seat arising from our contemplation on bodhicitta. And then we recite the invocation verse, "O glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the payments of body, speech, and mind." At the end of the first recitation, the figure begins the journey towards us. At the end of the second, they arrive. And at the end of the third, they are seated steadfastly on our crown until we attain the state of enlightenment, and we feel a sense of real genuine joy regarding that. Then we make the offering of the 7-limbed practice as well as the mandala offering. And as a result of our offering of the 7-limb practice and the mandala offering, The figure of Chenrezig experiences great bliss that combines with boldness, and they abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
我的这，我的这，安尼的呢，这个说我的这，的呢，他那么接着是，我嘞，他让你的爸妈他这了，就说是这今年中生活春节说些，安尼的呢，第一的段他你们经过这恐怕是第的，到你到没些了，他的那个那么接着是恐怕中国我的干嘛都再卷了，中国是我的个再卷了，安尼六这边、三这边，然后这里先把就要这边再卷的他。아니 다 니가 말와 셔바지 매바 있자 아니 원 많이 받을 걸 셈샤네 아니 가서다 니메 긴거지 또 소삼사차 아니 되네도 왔다 지금 가서다 심지어 탐제가 또 다 묘한이도 아니 말라마 제세 고마 두바치기 삼사 고마시 아니 된데그 셈티 된데 두바티 삼로티 아니 가서다 다외 긴거지 또 소삼사 고마시
Next, we begin the establishing of our lotus, sun, and moon disk mandala seat at our own heart in preparation for the inviting of the gurus and Rasik down to our heart. And here we establish again the lotus mandala seat from our contemplation on renunciation, that sense of gaining definite emergence from cyclic existence, and that mind itself then produces the lotus. Which is symbolic of that. And then reflecting on myself, the one really aspiring to attain enlightenment. Where is that sense of self? Where is that self? Where is that I? Is it in the body? Is it in the mind? Going through that meditation, searching for that which is not found, and pausing on the mere negation of the object of negation. From that mind then arises the moon, sun disk mandala seat. And then this self that is a dependent arising, that through practice and progress on the path, that the desire to quickly attain that state of enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta. From that mind itself then arises the moon disk mandala seat.
아니 되는 다 받는자 라마를 보자 다 인가 빼면 되죠. 그래서 고선도 용으로 짜줘서 되는 순대 전에다 담배 값서 폐 니베 값서 쇼 수배가 되는 산제 고마마도 봐도 제조 소소 설설서 가고 안테나 이가서 니데 빼마다 마 값좀 한다 남진인데 다들 네 가들 안 도지 가고 생각하고 치대가 지금 같이 되게 좋거든요. 제 아니 제 타고도 아니 가서라 제레스 나 오마니 빼마고 이거 수고하듯 되네 아니 가서 자매 그 제가 엄다리 두다리 뚫어서 와서 되네요 난고들 때내가 오면 얘다만 해도 저에 따다가다 해도 마셔만을 해서 되네 이거 수고하듯 뭐든지 제 공부 시에서
And then we make the invocation verse, O glorious and precious root Guru, come take your lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of body, space, and mind. At the end of the first recitation of that verse, the figure begins to move down through my crown chakra, down through the central channel. At the end of the second recitation, they have arrived at my heart center. And at the end of the third, they remain. We have this certainty of their remaining steadfast there until we attain the state of enlightenment. And that brings a great sense of joy and confidence to us. And then the leaves of the lotus fold over, enfolding the figure of Chenrezig at our heart. And they are sealed at the tips with the 5-pronged white vajra. And then enfolding leaves are encircled by 3 mantras, the first of which is Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra of the compassion of Chenrezig in a clockwise direction, and then the mantra of Tara, Om Tara Kitara Tu Soha in anti-clockwise direction, and then the mantra of dependent origination again in a clockwise direction.
다 따라 제대 지그래도 얘들 아이들 면주실을 나위 내가 또 어떻게 아니 되네 다 간자 지금 소리 되게 아니 라마 제레시티 아니 랑이 니가 거든 내가 돼 아니 콜레 왜세트네 랑이 지원에 가지고 다 르기 아니 낭타자 왜기 참네 될라 때네 아니 랑이 다 르고로 소주와 마제만 넘어 미사와 줘발로 다 제가 하나마도 와 제가 하나마도 세딜 중아 생각마 대응마 토마 매발 샤브레다 티바데 티바티 안 다가니 저 타마 수송 가지라 소마다 나선에서 로다라 소마다 가자 미이 주목이 아니 다 가자 미게와 주다 계획을 다 내봐 제가 하나와 지금 맞다마 세디 생각마 대응 토마 매발 티바데 티바티 제가 다 내마도 맞췄어 내마도 맞췄어 아니 딜라 때는 조에게 아니 수고라다 내나살라 소마다 다가네 세게 제 셈다 아니 루기 다 가지 가서데 딱 강에 간제 줘봐 이제 되게 gần 마도 저 다가네 제 싸롱 티리 변 탐제 바짱 장네 아니 다 장네 아니 다 하고도 아니 다 뉴도 산제 고마 토발라 다 타메게 난제 비견 치슈이 뭐 있어 타메게 난시 다 젠 가나타데 다바란 자 바지 찾도 맞 와다 데데 중수 소도다 양고 슈 중수 소소 와데 고마시
So then light rays begin to emanate from the figure within the lotus petals, and they permeate through the petals, through every cell of our bodies, from the tip of the head down to the soles of the feet, and thereby purifying all the negativities that we have accumulated through body, speech, and mind since a beginningless time, starting with the killing, stealing, sexual misconduct that we have physically engaged in, through the verbal negativities of lying, harsh speech and divisive speech and idle gossip, and then through the mental negativities of covetousness and malicious intent and wrong view. And that here, all those faults that have been naturally, all those negativities naturally occurring, and those proscribed by the Buddhist teachings, and that we have counteracted and that we purified. They are all purified. They are completely purified. All those that I'm engaged in this life, in the previous life, and indeed all life since beginningless time, they are now completely purified. All issues of health, of disease, and of illness are again purified out. The faults of my channels, winds, and drops again are purified. And indeed, especially the fault of ordinary appearance, which is the main obstacle to my quickly attaining the state of enlightenment. This is counteracted completely, and I now view all reality with this pure appearance.
아니 내가 소소의 신도처럼 롱드지 랭게자 아니 가서다 라마제르스가 아니 고들 현재 적인 전에 소소 류의 라마제르스 콜로 주수 삼사자 소소 신도처럼 셈드니 랭자 라마제르스가 투들 현재 적인 전에 랑게 셈데 라마제르스가 툴로 주수 삼사자 다 랑게 룽아 예소다 라마제르스제 구조도 뭐 예매 주수 삼사 아니 내디야 아니 내가 탐제 됐네 라마제르스가 시작할 주소 선서체 이 대화들 때 동반 대통령 수면 시켜서 선서 고발시
And so then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the substantial cause, together with the body of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body is transformed into the enlightened body of Chenrezig. Then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the substantial cause, together with the mind of Chenrezig acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And then I rejoice in that now my own body, speech, and mind are inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of the enlightened Chenrezig. And also that the place that I am in has been purified of all faults and is transformed into the palatial abode of an enlightened being.
wesa chowa la tenda la tena ani che karso la ta kanja simje re de ne ani wesa de da timala tena de da tanje ge chere se kusu to mo yi me ju ne de da tamje cha ani chere se ge ani she kha de jo so samta cha oda 다 간제 각 오래 다 와들자 다 심지어 탐제 더 타지버 주부에서 니마들이 쭉쭉쭉 가고 내가 라제레스 심지어 탐제 제레스 고마도 아니 데이지다 랑기 개와 가리 두바다 아니 저게 소소다 잡아가 유대나 마주마 또가 파다 점데 성공바시 디 대와 대와 동바 대돈이 수리 시켜서 성공바시.
And then through seeing myself as the fully enlightened Chen Rezig, from my heart center emanate countless rays of light equal in number to all the sentient beings in all the 6 realms of existence. As the light rays touch them, they are spontaneously transformed into a fully enlightened Chen Rezig, and their place is also purified of all fault and transformed into the enlightened palatial abode of an enlightened being. And so they then also experience the sense of bliss combining with voidness and the non-dual bliss and voidness. And that then I rejoice in fact of having attained that state of enlightenment itself, but more importantly have led all sentient beings to that state of enlightenment as well. How wonderful that is. And then I contemplate on how that state of Chen Rezig, the virtue that leads to that state, myself as the agent leading all sentient beings to that state, are completely empty of any objective existence and merely imputed by thought. And that having contemplated this absorbs into bliss, which combines with the voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness.
다 지금 뭐가 이제 잡으래 이나야 아니 아니 사변전 아니 뉴도 다 되는 시지 용하게 아니 줄이 좋아서 아니 뒤체도 다 가져지 가서도 다 돈이 니지 니고 지금 람 냥서 랑구요래 다 자주가 섬도 돈이 더 비싸는데 람들이 다 가져 지금 소소게 다 지금 상해게 내저 근데 좋아이나 예 가네 나치 근데 좋아이나 대다 탐자 아니 잠지 자주가 섬도 돈이 더 비싸라 기회 아니 줄이 좋아서 이 튕겨를 좋아서 소도 좀 watch 다 되는지 제토마 이나 아니 뉴원 뉴스다 르볼 마토바 아니 자주가 섬 줄게 르볼 마토바 돈이 더 비싸라 줄게 지 용거로 와 다가자 소소게 제 상게 야도 가리임바 이네 자주 섬께와다 돈이 더 비싸라 기회 깨도 주도 맞 트랜스포머션 제도 맞 다 섬노 순제라 땅 어디를 잡아나 다 남시나 아니 거 구조시 되기 와 구조시 되기 어다 그렇지 됐어 할로 그래서 할로
Yeah, the driller the yakun dugena.
last
Cache de kosangena.
last
So Jenna saying that of course we're operating here at the level of our own imagination, but we make sure to make a very sincere dedication that we can actually quickly make this manifest for real. That's extremely important, and that also to really reinvigorate and rededicate our determination to be able to use every aspect of our experience, whether good, bad, or indifferent, and to see it as an opportunity for engaging on the spiritual path, transform all of our experience to be a conducive condition for furthering our spiritual ambitions on the path. And that's extremely important.
Hola, ya gyawade
ne